walking home with an umbrella in the rain, trying not to get wet and trying not to let the umbrella drip the water that's pouring down onto you? Now, what if the umbrella had a hole in it? What if the umbrella had lots of little holes in it? It probably wouldn't be very useful as an umbrella. In fact, it would be downright useless, since you'd just be holding up dead weight that wasn't protecting you from any of the water. Now, what happens if that happens to our national security? What happens if our national security has holes in it like an umbrella? Well, we're going to be examining this today as I answer the question, will NATO succeed in building a Europe-wide missile shield over Europe? My answer to this is no. There are too many obstacles to overcome. Now, before I get into the details of my answer, I want to explain some background behind this. NATO refers to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is a military alliance of primarily European states, as well as the United States and a few other countries. They work together for common military purposes. They protect each other if one of them is attacked, and they're a general military alliance that works together to protect each other. And the Missile Defense Shield refers to a program that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, is currently trying to set up. It's based off missile interceptors based in Europe, in European countries, that attempt to shoot down any missiles carrying nuclear warheads that might be fired from such nation states as Iran or North Korea that would be flying over the European continent. So what the question is asking is, will this band of military countries be able to issue an effective military and defensive shield to any missiles that might be flying over their territory? So my answer is no. There are too many obstacles for this shield to overcome. We're going to be looking at this in several points. The first is fiscal limits. The first point is fiscal limits. European countries right now are going through a debt crisis, as is the United States, and simply don't have enough money to pay for the missile defense shield. Bloomberg News reported on November 4th that Europe is still trying to deal with their debt, which amounts to over €1 trillion in some countries. They're still trying to figure out a way to solve for their collective debt, and simply don't have enough money. As Dr. Pavel Podbeg said, they simply do not have enough money to pay for this collective missile defense shield, which would be quite expensive in order to shield the entire European continent from a missile attack by Iran. The European countries, as well as the United States, are still recovering economically from the Great Recession and are still attempting to get back on their feet, economically speaking. They simply don't have enough money to issue this expansive and comprehensive missile defense system. Now, the second issue that the missile defense system must overcome in order to go into effect is Turkish objections. Turkey is a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it has raised some objections. Now, part of the proposed missile defense system was going to be stationed in Turkey. An essential part, actually, the radar, the part of the missile defense system that tells the interceptors where to go. The way the missile defense system works is that there's a radar that tracks the missiles that are being fired by a hostile country and transmits that information to the interceptors, which fire intercepting missiles to attack the warhead and try to bring it down before it reaches its target. Now, the proposed radar for this system was going to be based in the country of Turkey, which is a member of NATO. However, Turkey has been somewhat ambivalent to this option, and it's unknown whether this part of the shield will actually go through. The Wall Street Journal said on November 1st that Turkey simply hasn't committed either way to having any part of the missile defense system on their territory. The reason for this is that Turkey and Iran are two great trading partners, and Turkey does not want to have Iran see that Turkey is aiding what Iran views as her enemies in the world, namely the United States and other Western European countries. Turkey simply doesn't want to lose the valuable trading partner that is Iran, and therefore they don't want a missile defense system in their territory that would aggravate Iran. The problem with this is that if Turkey makes a formal objection, the entire system is scuttled, because NATO works on something called consensus rule. Basically, if any country argues that a plan is inadequate or argues against it or votes it down, then the entire plan is scuttled. They simply have to have consensus rule for the plan to go through. The third reason that the system could fail is Russian objections. Now, Russia is not a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. However, it does have substantial way and influence over many of the countries in NATO. The Associated Foreign Press said on February 9th that Russia is viewing NATO as its main external military threat. Now, Russia and the NATO have a long history dating back to the Cold War. NATO was, in fact, founded in opposition to the then USSR. Now, as Russia grew out of the USSR and became its own independent country, at least nominally a democracy, NATO-Russian ties have eased somewhat. However, there's still a long and bitter rivalry between the two organizations, or between the organization and the country. The AP said in February of 2009 that Russia thinks that the United States-based missile defense system in Europe is directed at them rather than North Korea or Iran. Russia has a history of viewing any external military installations in what it views as its sphere of influence as aggravating and inappropriate and not respecting Russia's sphere of influence. Russia likes to have a sphere of influence around the countries that formerly made up the USSR, and should NATO or the United States install missile defense systems in those countries, it feels like it loses influence over those countries. The New York Times said that U.S.-Russia relations are already deteriorating, and this could push them over the edge. They simply need Russia's support because Russia commands so much influence among many of the countries in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now there's one last reason, the fourth point, why missile defense simply wouldn't work, and that is missile defense as a concept has significant technical problems with it. Even if we assume that the physical aspect of the shield goes forward, there's still something called countermeasures to take care of. Now the way that the missile defense system works is that when an ICBM, or an intercontinental ballistic missile, is outside the atmosphere, prepared to drop back down on its target, the missile defense system theoretically hits the ICBM while it's out in space, thus flying all of the nuclear warhead parts and the parts of the missile out into space. The problem is that when they're in space, they can deploy something called decoys and countermeasures that make it nearly impossible for the missile interceptor to hit the missile and its target, as Dr. Ted Postol said on November 1st. He said that missile defense simply fails as a concept because it's based on exo-atmospheric interception, which simply means it hits the missile that it's trying to hit when the missile is outside of the Earth's atmosphere, where there's no gravity, and it's very easy to deploy countermeasures. So as we can see, the proposed NATO missile defense system simply has too many structural problems. It faces opposition from influential countries, it faces technical problems, and it simply wouldn't work. So that is why my answer to the question, will NATO succeed in building a Europe-wide missile shield, is no, there are too many obstacles to overcome. Thank you.